Tales of Estolia. Written by Sashina Kerfman. Volume 1. The Promise of Zacharias. Part 6. Prophecy. Chapter 8. Decisions.
Deity chose the Estolian people to bestow great blessings upon, but like day follows night, all things have their price. And the price for our great blessing, as a people, is to keep the promise Zacharias made to Deity. Antonio Seton, Capitulo 35.
A discreet tap on her door roused her out of her thoughts, and she rose and went to open the door. It opened before she got to it. It was Nico's uncle, Zeke. He asked,
"Do you mind if I come in, my dear?"
She stepped backwards, allowing him to enter. They walked over to the small arrangement of chairs.
"I sensed your need to have a few more questions answered,"
he said.
"I do,"
she admitted.
"Nico said it was not typical to be so forthright about your religion, but it is a little bit different in a situation like this."
Nico's future was set before he was born, before his parents married. He was always destined to be the man to take my position in the fullness of time. It is not, however, an easy job he will be taking on. Keeping the soul of Estolia requires a strength of character, not only in the man who becomes keeper, but also in his spouse. We believe that Deity, our God, has a way of guiding the keeper to the one woman best qualified for the role. When he finds her, he will know it, because he sees her aura.
She wondered if she would ever get the nuances of this faith straight.
Nico was walking in the airport and he saw my aura, and that was it? He was stuck with me, even though he didn't speak with me before he saw it?
We have been a successful nation because of our great faith in the promise our founder Zacharias made to Deity, and in the promises that Deity made to him.
From what Nico told me, he makes it sound like being unfaithful is either impossible or at least uncommon. That sounds too good to be true.
He shared.
Estolians are not perfect. There have been a few limited situations where a couple have stepped outside the acceptable boundaries of marital relationships. In each case, they have opted to tie themselves to one another before that time dictated by Deity and without the sanction of the Church. In so doing, they nullify the promised blessings and constraints. In general, those couples choose to depart from Estolia's shores. We help them establish themselves in the greater world and hope they will find a type of secular love with each other that compensates for those blessings they have forsaken. However, I have never, in all of my time as keeper, heard of even one instance where a man was unfaithful to his wife.
So those who do wait until the marriage is sanctioned, they never stray, ever?
This was what she needed to know.
The promise of Zacharias is such that it becomes impossible to feel desire for another woman once a man gives his soul into the keeping of his Kaylee. You could, if you were so inclined, strip naked and openly attempt to seduce me, but nothing you did could entice me to desire you.
He meant it. He did not believe he could be tempted by another woman.
What about if your wife died? Would you be able to have another wife?
His expression was solemn.
No man can live without his soul. One of the great trade-offs the men of Estolia make in embracing the faith is the way they become tied to the woman who keeps their soul. Some women who lose their spouse will live on. Often it depends on how much they are needed in this world. Typically, a man and his spouse pass away within a week of one another.
He leaned forward to grasp her hands. It felt like he was communicating through his body language more than voice, his touch itself transmitting information.
When a man's Kaylee, the keeper of his soul, passes on, then he will die within 1 week. He has time enough to finalize any of the loose ends of his life, but no man can survive without her. The joy we experience in life makes this a sacrifice we are willing to make.
I guess that means Nico really does need to be sure I'm the right one for him.
Kenzie said. Physical pain blasted through her system as she faced the possibility that he might reevaluate and choose someone else.
No, my dear, it is not that simple.
He frowned slightly before explaining.
Once a man is gifted to see the aura of his future mate, his future is sealed. Nico has two futures available to him at this point. Only two choices. He will do everything in his power to convince you to consummate your union, preferably on the day of his 30th birthday, and then marry you after.
His eyes grew shadowed as he continued.
If you are not sure, he does have a full year until he turns 31 to try to convince you.
One of his choices is to marry me either sooner or later, so long as he is 30 when the marriage takes place.
She asked.
Correct.
He smiled with a look of fond reminiscence.
Once he marries 7 days later, the spirit is consulted. And if the marriage is sanctioned by the spirit, then you are tied together until time ceases to be. This is merely a formality so long as the union is sanctioned beforehand. For the first consul, he is made keeper on the 8th day after his marriage, a very solemn and sacred ceremony.
And if he doesn't marry me, you select his bride for him?
Kenzie guessed. Zeke lost some of his color.
No, Kenzie, that is not what would happen.
He stood up and walked away from where she was sitting, going to look in the vanity mirror. He had a dark frown on his face. Turning, he walked swiftly back to her, pulling her to her feet, holding both of her hands, his eyes meeting hers.
I fear for Estolia, even for the planet itself, if you do not choose to marry my nephew. It is not typical for the king to have 3 sons. Nico has an older and a younger brother, and there was a prophecy made about all 3. The fate of our entire world is dependent on your choosing to take Nico's soul into your keeping. It was prophesied that the 3 sons of Lylane would be the future king, the future keeper, and a catalyst of change for planet Earth. Nico's younger brother, Zeb, must be allowed to fulfill his destiny.
I don't understand.
Kenzie said.
If the keeping of the soul is linked to virginity, can't Nico find another woman?
No, Kenzie. Once he saw your aura, he had no more choice.
She studied his expression. Despite his deep alarm at the thought of her rejecting Nico, he did not believe she would reject him. Feeling self-conscious at the way this man could so easily see into her soul, she asked.
Is there no room for love in this religion?
Kenzie, I can see you will be a delightful addition to our family. To answer your question, yes, love is a part of our religion. In the secular, non-Estolian world, the viewing of the aura is akin to love at first sight. When Nico saw you and your aura, he fell in love with you, as you, I think, fell in love with him.
Has anyone ever rejected the woman whose aura they saw?
She asked. His face grew serious again.
My aunt Anastasia fell in love with a university professor who was visiting here in Estolia. He had no religious background, and he was disturbed by what little she told him. She was young and impetuous, with a tempestuous nature. When he did not accept her the instant she shared the nuances of the Estolian faith, they argued. She rode back to the palace, but her horse spooked, and she was thrown. She broke her neck and died instantly. Eduardo was devastated. He never had another woman in his life. He remained a good friend of the family. His loss was felt by all who knew him.
She looked down to where her hands were still clasped in his. All the Estolian men she met seemed to feel things acutely.
It is strange that so much of your religion is centered around the actions of the men. I haven't heard much referencing the obligations of the women.
He chuckled, squeezing her hands before leading her to sit back down.
Women who are daughters of Estolia, those who embrace both the faith, and more importantly, those who take the soul of an Estolian into their safekeeping, are considered to have all the attributes of godliness. They do not need to do more than guide their spouse on the road of life. The rewards are impossible to enumerate. As a unit, a man and his Kaylee have great promise as to their eternal nature. The essence is felt here in this life. The details of what it is like in the life after this life, in Torreson, are not given to us to know. As a people, and as a religion, we are simple.
They were both silent for some time. Zeke finally stood and bowed at the waist.
I believe that is enough information for now. Please know I am always available to you. You might also wish to speak with Nico's father or his brother Leon. None of us doubted you were the woman destined to keep his soul.
He pulled her into his arms for a hug, and then left while she was still mulling his words over.